Welcome to another short tale. If you are entertained by it, then please consider sharing it so others can also be entertained. Without further ado, let's get to it. In the ash-dark valleys beyond the Red Cliffs lived the Broken Tusk tribe, a people of scarred shields and bone banners. Among them was a young orc woman named Gracia, broad-shouldered but not the tallest, quick-eyed but not the most cunning, stubborn enough to keep standing when most would fall. Her tusks were smaller than those of the older warriors, something the tribe never failed to notice. Yet Gracia carried a quiet certainty in her chest: she would become chief. Among the Broken Tusk, becoming chief was not decided by blood alone. Any warrior bold enough could attempt the 4 trials. Few survived them all. Even fewer completed them in a single season. The trials were ancient: hunting, strength, cunning, and observation. When the first frost came, Gracia stepped into the circle of firelight before the elders. "I claim the trials," she said. A low murmur spread through the gathered tribe. Some laughed, some looked curious. A few old warriors narrowed their eyes thoughtfully. The chief, a scarred veteran named Drogma One-Eye, leaned forward on his carved bone staff. "Then live or die by them," he said. And so the first trial began. The first trial: hunting. The hunting trial demanded that the challenger bring back the head of a spine boar, a creature infamous for its temper and the jagged quills that grew along its back like spears. A single hunter. One day. No help. At dawn Gracia left the valley carrying only a bone spear, a short axe, and a coil of rope. The sky was pale grey and the wind carried the cold scent of distant snow. Spine boars lived in the thorn woods where the ground was broken by roots and ravines. Even experienced hunters feared them. When enraged, a spine boar charged like a falling boulder. Gracia followed tracks for hours. Hoof prints. Scraped bark. Fresh dung. The sun climbed. By midday she found it. The beast was enormous, nearly the size of a warhorse, its hide thick and dark, its spines rattling softly as it dug through the earth. Gracia crouched behind a fallen log, heart hammering. Too big, she thought. But the trial did not allow turning back. She crept closer. A twig snapped under her boot. The spine boar's head snapped up. Then it charged. The ground thundered. Gracia leapt aside, barely avoiding the tusks as they tore through the log where she had been hiding. Splinters exploded into the air. She thrust her spear. It glanced off the beast's thick shoulder. The boar wheeled around, squealing with fury. Its spines rattled like dry bones. The second charge came faster. Gracia tried to dodge again, but her foot slipped in the mud. The boar slammed into her, throwing her across the clearing. Her ribs screamed in pain when she hit the ground. The world spun. She rolled just in time as the boar's tusks gouged the earth beside her skull. Gracia grabbed her axe and swung wildly. The blade bit into the creature's ear. Blood sprayed. The boar screamed and reared back. Gracia didn't think. She scrambled up a crooked tree trunk and climbed desperately as the boar crashed against the base, shaking the entire tree. Her spear lay broken in the mud below. The boar waited. Minutes passed. Then Gracia saw it, a narrow ravine nearby, its sides steep and slick. An idea formed. She dropped from the tree and ran. The boar thundered after her. Branches whipped her face. Her lungs burned. She could hear the beast gaining ground. At the ravine's edge she skidded sideways. The boar tried to stop. Too late. The ground crumbled beneath its weight. The massive animal slid over the edge and crashed into the rocky bottom with a sickening crack. Gracia collapsed on her knees, shaking. When she finally climbed down, the spine boar was still breathing but broken. She ended its suffering with her axe. That evening she returned to the tribe, dragging the heavy head behind her. The tribe gathered around as she dropped the trophy in the dirt. A few warriors looked disappointed. It was clear she had barely survived, but she had survived. Drogma One-Eye nodded slowly. The hunt is past. The second trial: strength. The strength trial was simpler in name but crueler in practice. The challenger must carry the stone of ancestors from the valley floor to the cliff shrine above. The stone weighed nearly as much as a young bull. No tools. No sleds. Only muscle. At dawn the tribe assembled again. Gracia stood before the stone. Her ribs still ached from the boar's charge. She placed both hands on the rock. "Lift," commanded Drogma. Gracia strained. Nothing. The tribe chuckled quietly. She growled, wedging her fingers under the stone's edge. The rock shifted. Her back screamed. Slowly, painfully, she managed to tilt it upright and wrap her arms around it. Then she lifted. For a moment the world narrowed to a tunnel of effort. She staggered forward. The path up the cliff was steep and uneven. Loose stones rolled beneath her feet. Halfway up her legs trembled violently. The stone slipped. She nearly dropped it. Below, several warriors smirked. Too small, their eyes said. Gracia bared her teeth and pushed onward. Step. 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 By the time she reached the final slope her vision blurred. Her arms felt like they were tearing from their sockets. She stumbled. The stone fell from her grasp and tumbled backward down the slope with a thunderous crash. A collective gasp rose from the watching tribe. Gracia collapsed to her knees. For several breaths she simply knelt there, shaking. Then slowly, painfully, she stood again. Without a word she climbed back down the path. The tribe fell silent as she reached the stone. Gracia wrapped her arms around it once more. And lifted. The second climb was worse. Every step was agony. But this time she did not stop. With a final roar she shoved the stone onto the cliff shrine and collapsed beside it. The elders climbed up to inspect. The stone rested fully within the carved ring. Drogma nodded again. The strength trial is passed. But his voice carried surprise. Gracia had not looked strong enough. Yet somehow she had endured. The third trial, cunning. If strength belonged to the body, the third trial belonged to the mind. The challenger must steal a token from the chief's tent without being caught. The chief, however, would be waiting. Night fell across the valley. Torches flickered. Warriors drank and laughed around the fires. Gracia crouched in the shadows of the bone huts, studying the camp. The chief's tent stood at the center, guarded by 2 veterans. Inside waited Drogma himself, an experienced hunter who had survived more ambushes than most warriors could imagine. Gracia watched for nearly an hour. Every guard shift. Every patrol. Every shadow. Finally she moved. She crawled through the darkness, silent as she could manage. When the guards looked away she slipped behind a stack of supply crates. The entrance to the tent flapped gently in the wind. She darted forward and slipped inside. Drogma sat in the center, sharpening a knife. His single eye lifted. "Too loud," he said. Gracia froze. She had been seen instantly. The chief lunged. Gracia grabbed a stool and threw it between them, diving toward a shelf where the chief's bone medallion hung. Drogma caught her ankle and yanked her backward. She crashed into the ground. The chief pinned her easily. "Trial failed," he growled. But then something clattered outside the tent. Both of them glanced toward the entrance. In that moment Gracia twisted free, rolled across the floor, and snatched the medallion. She bolted out of the tent. Behind her Drogma burst out roaring with laughter. The warriors gathered as Gracia held up the medallion. "What was the noise?" one asked. Gracia opened her hand. A small stone dropped into the dirt. She had tossed it outside the tent before entering, setting the distraction. Drogma crossed his arms. "You were caught," he said. Gracia lowered her head slightly. "Yes." A tense silence fell. Then the chief grinned. "But you still escaped with the prize." He turned to the elders. "The cunning trial is barely passed." Several warriors grumbled. Gracia knew the truth. She had nearly failed. The fourth trial, observation. The final trial was rarely attempted. Observation tested the challenger's awareness of the world itself. At sunrise the elders led Gracia deep into the mountains to an ancient stone circle. Carvings covered the pillars, symbols older than the tribe. "You will sit here until sunset," Drogma said. "Then tell us everything you have seen." "That is all?" Gracia asked. The chief's eye glinted. "That is all." The elders left. At first the task seemed simple. Gracia sat quietly, watching the valley below. But hours passed. Clouds drifted across the sky. Birds wheeled overhead. The wind changed direction. She began noticing things she normally ignored. The way insects gathered on the warmer stones. The pattern of lichen on the pillars. The distant movement of herd animals across the plains. When the elders returned at dusk, they formed a circle around her. Drogma spoke first. What did you see? Gracia stood. At first, little, she admitted. Then she began listing everything she had observed. The path of the sun across the carvings. The number of hawks that passed overhead. The way the wind carried scents from 3 different valleys. The hidden trail used by mountain goats behind the ridge. The shift in bird calls when a fox moved through the brush. The elders exchanged glances. She continued. She described the carvings on each pillar, not just their shapes but how the shadows changed them through the day. She even noticed a crack forming in the northern stone where frost would soon split it apart. Finally she fell silent. Drogma stared at her for a long moment. You saw all that, in one day? Gracia nodded. I had to watch. It was the only thing I could do. The chief turned to the elders. One by one they nodded. Drogma raised his staff. The 4th trial is won. Not past. Won. Aftermath. That night the tribe gathered again beneath the great bone banners. The fires burned high. Gracia stood before them, bruised, exhausted, and covered in scars from the trials. She had nearly died hunting, nearly collapsed in strength, nearly failed in cunning. But in observation she had shown something none expected. Drogma lifted the ancestral crown, a circlet made from the tusks of long-dead chiefs. You scraped through 3 trials like a stubborn boar in mud, he said loudly. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But the last trial, he continued. You saw what others did not. He placed the crown on her head. And a chief must see. The tribe roared their approval. Gracia felt the weight of the tusks settle onto her brow. For the first time since the trials began, she allowed herself a small smile. The path to chief had nearly broken her. But she had walked it. And now the Broken Tusk tribe had a new leader, one who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes victory did not belong to the strongest. Sometimes it belonged to the one who noticed everything. Thank you for listening to our little tale. If you have found it entertaining, then please share the story. Until next time, as always, be well.